Hello, my friends. This is another show of Astrological Voyages from Christos Archos from Athens with me. And we are going to talk about what is going to happen for the next 7 days and the most important aspects that are going to affect us. But also we're going to speak about a method that I think that it helps a lot when we want to do a serious psychological analysis. And this is the human method. So we're going to talk later about that. First of all, we are going to start and talk about the most important aspects that is going to affect us in the next week. And we can see various aspects that are of great importance and is going to change a lot of things in our everyday life. First of all, what is very important, if we start from today, it is that we are having this Mars entering the sign of Scorpio. Mars entering Scorpio is always about passion, is about having a lot of influence, is about being intense, about having sexual tension, is about also having victory over your opponents. I think this is always a position of strength, of power, of being in control of things. And the most important thing always has to do with being intense and having the power to change things in your life. Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius, they are going to have the most important changes if we look at those aspects that Mars is going to form. And I think that probably Scorpios are going to feel this power in a very intense way. I think we're going to have a lot of sexual appetite, but also this is always an aspect that is going to bring a lot of new ideas and also the ability and the power to change your destiny. Something I think really important because really this position of Mars is of great importance, and Mars traditionally in this region is very powerful. And I think this is always about dealing with everyday information, but also about understanding what's the real meaning behind those typical information we may have. And I think this is always about sex, about having power, about needing time and consolidate your resources and also try to change what needs to be changed. So I think this is a very powerful transit. It's going to affect a lot the Cancer, the Scorpios, and also people that belong to the sign of Pisces. First of the first decan and the next decans, they're going to be affected afterwards. The next aspect, which I think is very important, is the aspect of the Sun forming a semi-sextile with Jupiter. And I think this is a great aspect because it's going to bring a lot of new ideas to the people. And I think if you belong to the signs of um, let's say, of Scorpio and also of Sagittarius of the third decan around the 26th, 27th, and 28th degree, I think you're going to feel very fulfilled. You're going to understand that things are going your own way. And perhaps you may feel that you can change the direction of your life through some instant information that may come from your superconscious or perhaps from a friend or a foe that he may not believe, but it's going to help you a lot in having success in your life. Also, on the 20th of November 2019, we're having this Mars having a sesquisquare with Neptune. This is an aspect that is going to affect a lot of the people born around the 0 degree of Scorpio, 1 degree, or even 29 degree of Libra, but also it's going to affect a lot the 14, 15, and 16 degree of Pisces. This is an aspect of charisma, but also it's about illness. It's about being tired, not having enough energy, being indecisive, requiring more energy to do things. And also it's about secrets that are hidden, but also about passionate affairs that are not in control. And of course, some scandals. There is always the urge to escape during this transit. And I think that there is always this problem with energy and perhaps of miscalculation of your actions that is going to become a real problem. So be aware that this aspect is not very helpful, and you need to have a stronger attention during these days, especially if you are very tired, or if you are spending your energy without having a complete and a serious target in your life, which I think is very important. I think now you're going to hear me better. Okay, so let's continue, and let's go to the next aspect. And the next aspect is not an aspect, but it is the direction going directed. The directed Mercury in the 20th of November 2018 is going to affect a lot the people of the fixed signs, Taurus, Scorpio, Leo, and Aquarius. I think this is a possibility of finding solutions to problems that were not very easily solved in the last days. This is a great position for those who want to deal with old things, and also for all of you that you want to do something new that is going to bring you lots of happiness. This is always a great aspect in having new meetings and also in finding new things in your life. On the 22nd of November 2019, we'll have the Sun entering the sign of Sagittarius. This is, I think, a very good year for those who belong to this sign. Sagittarius, you are going to feel fulfilled in your financial situation, and a lot of things is going to change in your personal affairs, which I think is the main problem and concern in the last years. But on the other hand, Sagittarians of the second decade, those who are going to be affected by the transit of Neptune, you're going to feel this losing your target or having complicated emotional affairs, and you may feel a little tired. But on the other hand, this is always a time for using your charismatic abilities to do what you want, but also a new chance on having a communication with your inner self and something superior than you, your spiritual guide, for example. Also, in the 24th of November 2019, we have the semi-square between Mercury and Venus. This is always an aspect that has to do with misunderstandings in emotional affairs. And people on the second decade of Scorpio and the third decade of Sagittarius, they are going to be affected heavily the next days. This is always about believing that you're in love with someone that you may not. It's about having an idealistic belief about something, about someone that is not in reality something true. And this is always about putting your energy to things that they are not worthy. On the other hand, in the 24th of November 2018, we have this great trine between Sun and Chiron. This is a great aspect for those who belong in the fiery signs of the first decan, especially around the 0, 1st, and 2nd degree. It's about healing, it's about dealing with problems, about getting over the past, about creating new ideals, about creating a new base in your life. I think this is an aspect that is going to bring you a lot of happiness, but also is an aspect that is going to bring you a lot of joy, a lot of communication with others. And of course, people that are belong also to the sign of Gemini and Libra, also around those degrees, 0, 1, and 2nd degree, they are going to be very happy, and you're going to feel fulfilled. Oh, and I forgot that. If you live in Ireland, I will be very happy to see you from close, because in the 22nd of November, I'm going to speak to the astrological group Astrology Ireland in Dublin. I'm going to speak about happiness, disorders, and how we can find all of this information about happiness and disorders in psychological astrology. This is a great lecture, I think. A lot of people, you're going to learn a lot of new techniques about how a person is happy or how he can acquire happiness, but also how we can understand several disorders according to our natal charts. I'm a professional astrologer and psychologist, so I know my job. And if you are in Dublin in the 22nd of November, I would be very happy to see you from close. Margaret Gray and is going to do the is going to organize the thing, so you can communicate with her in Ireland. And I will be in the 22nd of November there, and I will be very happy to meet all of these new Irish people that love astrology, and we may become even friends. So I will be very happy to see you from close. Now, let's continue. In the 24th of November 2019, we are having a great conjunction. This is a great conjunction. It's a conjunction of love, passion, about money, about bringing new people around your life. This conjunction between Venus and Jupiter is about a conjunction of being fulfilled, about being in control, about being happy, about doing things. And I think this is always a conjunction of being finally complete. It is going to affect a lot Sagittarians, Aries, and of course Leos of the third decan around the 27, 28, and 29th degree, but also Geminis, Pisces, and Virgo of the third decan around the degrees I've already mentioned. They are going to feel all of this positive energy about finding something great. This is an aspect of being comfortable, is about being generous and being friendly, but also this is always about feeling happy and being beautiful inside. This is a great aspect, and you really need to take care of it and use it in order to do what you want. On the 24th of November 2018, on the other hand, we have this Mars having an opposition, forming this opposition with Uranus. This is always an aspect of tension. It is going to bring a lot of conflict in the first decade of Taurus, Scorpio, Leo, and Aquarius. I think Taurus and Scorpio, the first decade, they are going to feel a lot of tensions in their personal affairs, and you may have some conflicts with your intimate relationships, but also with people you're cooperating. On the other hand, Leos and Aquarians are going to feel a lot of problems in their houses, but also a lot of problems in their daily life and in their careers. Also, problems may arise with your parents, so you may have to look closer to them and be very careful. This is an aspect also of accidents. You need to be very careful when driving, and also try to fight for what is right, but do not act in a very aggressive way. Try to fight for your freedom, but do not destroy everything around you. This is always about being polite and also dealing with the concept of freedom. Also, this is always about an aspect of having an impulsive need and need to act, and that may create some problems. So you really need to be careful around those days. Then you have to look at the Sun forming a semi-square with Saturn. I think this is going to affect a lot the first decan of Sagittarius, first, second, and third degree, and also the 16th, 17th, and 18th degree of Capricorn. I think this is always an aspect about dealing with obstacles. And people in the first decan of Sagittarius and also in the second decan of Capricorn may feel that they are in some kind of blockage, a lot of obstacles, limitations, inhibitions. You may have problems in your judgment, and perhaps you may not be able to decide what you want or what you have to do in your life during this transit. Finally, we have this contra-parallel between Mars and Uranus in the 25th of November 2018, which is going to complete the tensions and the problems that are going to arise in the 24th of November with this opposition between Mars and Uranus. At the end of the week, we have this Mercury forming a semi-square with Jupiter, and it's going to affect the second decade of Scorpio in the 12th, 13, and 14 degree, but also in the 27th, 28th, and 29th degree of Sagittarius. This is about talking too much and giving the wrong information to the people. So you have to be very careful when you're sharing your information, because problem may arise and you may have several overconfidence judgments that may bring a lot of problems later on in your life, something that is not very good. On the other hand, this is always about assimilating new ideas and forming new kind of concepts in your life, something that is going to help you a lot in creating new things, and also finding an eureka, a fine idea that is going to bring a solution that you were in need for a lot of time. So those are the most important aspects for the next 7 to 8 days. And we are going to continue with some questions that I had from you. And also later on, I'm going to talk about the Huber method, which I think is one of the greatest ways of understanding psychologically a natal chart. One question that I received was that if I use mostly the common traditional planets, or I'm using the modern planets, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, or even Chiron and other planets like Sedna, Aries, and others. My personal opinion is that when we are dealing with things that are of everyday situations, you don't need to use the outer planet, the superconscious planets like Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, because planets still Saturn is about our everyday life, and you can really have a very good reading with these normal old 7 planets we were using till 1700s. You may add some serious and very useful information with Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, and other planetoids, but I think that for millennia, astrologers were given enough information about material lives, emotional lives, and etc., with just having those 7 planets. But if you are going to use the odd ways, you need to learn the odd ways. You need to use a part of fortune. You need to understand the prenatal new moon or full moon. You need to understand the concepts of having a night or a day sect. And you may need to understand the essential and accidental dignities. So you cannot just use the old 7 planets in a modern context. You cannot use the old 7 planets just the way we are using the modern planets, because there will be a problem. They may not have Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, or other asteroids or the centers, but they were having a lot of rules and a lot of things that were changing the situation of a planet rapidly. In my point of view, there is only one astrology. There is not this war between traditional and modern astrology. I think it's superficial. It's not real. Both astrologies are part of astrology. Traditional astrology is still in astrological way, in a very different way as the modern astrology. But there is not right or wrong. It's about where is your focus. And we know that in the traditional techniques, the people were all about prediction, about dealing with everyday events. So their astrology was always about predicting about fate. On the other hand, we know that modern astrology is about free will, about spirit, sometimes about psychology. And I think that the rules of the modern astrology is more about dealing with personalities and how the personalities can predict future phenomena and events in our life. Although you can also predict 100% using modern techniques. But I think the traditional way, you are more at ease when you're using the grounding that traditional astrology gives you. I've studied both, I use both, but for different reasons. personally, when I'm having a more earthy situation to deal with, like, for example, financial matters, or about emotional life, or if someone is going to get married, I'm going to use traditional astrology. But for example, when I'm going to do an in-depth look of a psychological profiling, if something happens, if an event that is going to change rapidly the things around his life, or about more in-depth analysis of what really happens with some cautious, and about social situations, I will go to modern. But if someone tries to tell you that only traditional works or only modern works, that means that he wants something from you. And usually it's about control, and second is about money. So, although money is also about control, so I think you need to respect both. They are, for different reasons, very useful. And I think an astrologer should look both. In my school, they are learning both. You cannot differentiate between those two things. You need to understand the basic concepts of the Hellenistic. Well, in Greece, we are learning Hellenistic astrology because we are Greeks, so it's a part of our culture. It's very important. But you need to learn the past and and what happens now, but also you need to understand both in order to have a future. So in the question, if I use mostly traditional techniques or modern techniques, traditional planets or modern planets, I use both. I can use Aries, Saturn, the asteroids. For example, I have these great books. I always forget her name. I'm so bad. Of Martha Lang Westcott, which I think is one of the greatest people around asteroids. And I learn about asteroids. I learn about everything. You can do things, but you need to understand what is better for you. But something that is better for you doesn't mean that it's bad for everyone. That is best for everyone else. So everyone needs to find his own way in dealing with everyday situations. And I think I'm a double Gemini, that we need to be flexible in using our knowledge. If you just know the one part, you don't know what you're missing from the other part. So you need to go in depth in both directions. And you need to understand that even traditional astrology is not one thing. We have the Babylonian and Assyrian astrological principles, which are of great importance if you look at them. We have the Hellenistic astrology. We have later on the Byzantine, the Greek medieval, and Arabic astrologies, which are different from the Hellenistic inheritance. They may have a lot of common things, but they have also some differences. For example, a big difference between Hellenistic astrology at the end of the Hellenistic astrology and the beginning of the Byzantine era is that a planet is not compassed although he is in conjunction with the sun, because he's in his dominion, exaltation, or in his term, which is, I think, very fascinating how astrology developed through the ancient years towards the medieval years. So we have this Byzantine Arabic astrology, and then we have the Renaissance astrology, which also is different in many ways. You can find difference between Bonatti and the Hellenistic astrologers. And then we have the Enlightenment period, for example, William Lilly. And then, of course, we have the recent Theosophic astrology that was created by Charles Carter, Cephariel, and other astrologers around this period, Alan Leo. And we have, of course, finally, the last century of astropsychology and humanistic astrology and transpersonal astrology and cosmobiology, Uranian astrology. And you may find that some techniques are more useful than others, but you need to learn them in order to criticize them. Otherwise, you should not criticize them. And I think that the most of the techniques, not all, there are some techniques I believe that they are just mumbo jumbo, but the most of techniques and the most of the schools, especially modern and traditional, are very useful in dealing with different information, and you have to look at them both. This is my point of view. This is the way I understand things. And I think this is very important. Now, one more question that I got from my friends here in Astrological Voyages is about, am I going to create a solar return for the region I visited for just one day or just 1 week? So, for example, I live in Athens and I live permanently in Athens, Greece. And for example, in this 31st of May, I'm going to speak in Istanbul, Turkey. I will be in Istanbul for 1 day, just in the day of my birthday. So I'm going to create a chart for my solar return with Istanbul being the location. Of course not, because it will just work for the time I will be in Istanbul. This is not going to affect me for the whole year. The whole year is going to be affected by my permanent residence, which is, of course, Athens, Greece. Even if I stayed in Istanbul, for example, 1 month, and then I came back to Athens, for the time I will be in Istanbul, I'm going to be affected by the Saturn and the midheaven of the city of Istanbul. But when I come back to Athens, I will be using again my solar return being in Athens, Greece. So don't try to cheat the universe. This is not going to work. Your solar returns is going to work in whatever place you are living now. And is the axis, the ascendant and the midheaven, they are also going to change accordingly, which is, I think, something very important. And I will answer more questions. If you have any questions you want me to answer to you in the next Astrological Voyages, I will be very happy to send me your problems in your interpretation, some problems on using some techniques. I would be more than happy to help you and find my own way of dealing with astrology. I am teaching more than 15 years, and I'm an astrologer for about 22 years. And also I'm very young. And so I will be more than happy to share my knowledge. So if you have any question, I will be very happy to answer to you. And then I'm going to speak about Huber method. And the Huber method was found by the Bruno and Louise Huber, a couple that I think they worked very much in understanding the basics of psychology and psychological astrology. If you are into psychological astrology, of course, you know Liz Green, you know depth astrology, as in depth psychology, about archetypes, you know lots of things. But I think also that Huber astrology is very useful and is going to help you a lot in understanding some very important things. What is of great importance when you're finishing a psychological studies, I'm a professional psychologist and psychotherapist, is that when you are having, for example, a situation to deal with, you need to look to things, nature and nurture, which is, I think, very important in understanding not just nature and nurture, but also from now on the epigenetics, because we know that we have the genetics, the nature, then the epigenetics, how the environment, the nurture is affecting the genetics, and then the environmental factors. So we know that psychological profiling and psychological analysis is not a very easy job. It's about understanding your biology, your epigenetic changes through the environmental factors, and finally the developmental stages and what happens in your environment, which is of course very important. What I found very useful in using Huber method is that you can differentiate them. They have a system that can help you understand which thing comes from the genetics, which things come from the environment, and also which things from your personality come from the epigenetics, which is in the mid. It's how the environmental factors affect your genetics. It's all about to help you understand. For example, I have the genetics of being neurotic. We know in psychology, that neuroticism is something that in a very hyper sentence, you have it because of genetic reasons. You have the genes that is affecting you, and you are going to be neurotic because you have some genes. And then there is the epigenetics, for example, how the environment, even the food or the temperature that you were as a fetus and in the first years of your development, that are going to change your genetic code. And then we have the environment, and it is about how the environment is affecting your personality. For example, having a good dad that is very good with you and a mother that nurtures you is an environmental factor. Also, having a dad that is away and he's like being nowhere around your life, and a very hard mother, and for example a mother that does not treat you very well, this is always a fascinating developmental uh, um, reason to change your personality, that is going of course to be sown in your natal chart. And then we know very much that there are a lot of things that may change us during a period of our life. For example, let's imagine a woman that is a victim of rape in her 19 years. So when she is 19 years old, this is going to affect your personality. This is not about genes. This is not about epigenetics. This is about environment. But how the person is going to react has to do with your current personality that you already developed and your genes too. And that is why I am always saying that don't stick with the natal chart. Try to understand the secondary progress charts, the solar arcs. Try to understand different forms of astrology, because in that way you can understand what really happens in your life. Do not try to understand things in a stagnant way just by looking a natal chart. I've done this job, and I think that Huber method is very helpful because it helps us understand if something comes from the environment, if something comes from our genetic predisposition. It is also about karmic relationship, which I found very, very important. If you don't know at all, the 12 zodiac signs is your genetic predisposition, and the 12 houses with Koch system is about your environmental influences. Using them both, you can understand the epigenetics. And then they have a so-called chart called the North Node chart, which is a chart that you put the North Node in the first house and you go the clockwise way. So the 12th house is the first house, the 11th house is the second house, the third house is the 10th house, and etc. And you can understand about your karmic also relationship. But in psychological astrology, this chart is about your shadow. And of course, when we are dealing with psychological situations and archetypes, we really need to understand the shadow, because we know that shadow is a part of us that we do not accept it. So having an ability through a chart of understanding this North Node chart and our shadow is about really going in depth in analysis with people. I've done a great research before a year using astropsychological groups. So I've done some group counseling, having groups using astrology and psychology. And I think that when I was using this North Node charts, there was a real hit in dealing with what really happens with the shadow of various things. And I think this is always great, because we may sometimes find an archetype. For example, we know that Venus, for example, in Taurus, in a specific house, is about a specific archetype that is going to be influenced by another aspect. And you can understand several things about this archetype also by understanding the 5-point star of Venus. Always look at the 5-point star of Venus if you want to learn the archetype it's about. fundamental importance. So if you're having this kind of information, you can understand the archetype, but you don't know if the archetype is about your destiny, about spiritual empowerment, if it's about genetics, if it's about epigenetics, if it's about environment. And you learn so many things. Also, the Hubers found something that I found very useful. And I think the Hubers were using in a different way the planets. For example, Mercury, Jupiter, Venus, and Mars are the subconscious. The Sun, Moon, and Saturn are the consciousness, and Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto are the superconsciousness. Of course, behind these ideas is the psychology of psychosynthesis. Psychosynthesis is a technique of Roberto Assagioli, an Italian psychotherapist that was a student of Sigmund Freud, and as other pupils also Freud, students of Freud like Jung and Adler, he separated later on from Sigmund Freud, and he decided to do his own school, and he named it psychosynthesis. While Carl Jung was against psychoanalysis of Freud because he was always about sex, because Freud was always very sex was playing a very important role in his interpretation of things, even in dreams, and Jung created archetypes. Assagioli was against about dealing all about subconscious, because Freud was about subconscious, conscious, and hyperego, we call it in Greek, but I forgot now the word in English. Talking is about the society rules and how society, how your civilization is pressuring your ego, and how your subconscious is fighting with this societal power, and your ego is trying to create a balance between those two powers. On the other hand, Assagioli was saying something different, that we have subconscious, we have conscious, but we have also superconscious. Let's say the good subconscious, the higher ideals, the, let's say, angelic powers of your superior charismatic talents you have that are coming from upper realms and go downstairs. So for Assagioli, we're having three separate realms that has to do with subconscious, consciousness, and superconsciousness. So we have also in the Huber method the subconscious planet, Mercury and Jupiter, about logic and understanding principles, Venus about fulfilling your body and your needs, Mars about surviving. And then we have the conscious planets about the Sun, Moon, and Saturn. And then we have the superconscious planet about Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. And if you have the perfect evolutionary perspective, if you really are a complete person, you can find the ability to do the act of will. The will planet is Pluto, the ultimate planet of forming your own destiny. Of course, this is another concept that the Hubers taken from Assagioli. Assagioli has a book that is named The Act of Will, and it gives separate lessons of about how a person is going to find this will and change his future. I'm not going to tell you any more things in this show. I think I told you even a lot of information from now. We are going to say even more things in our next show in Astrological Voyages. Always, at least from now, from Athens. This is my second office. That is the reason you have a different background. Thank you very much for being with me for once more. And I really hope that you liked also one more show of Astrological Voyages. I hope you have a great time, and in whatever place in the planet you are, have a good time with your beloved ones. Bye bye.